90% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in they Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters gon' move. Whatever click you choose, you better
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down! For those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. Now let's hop straight up into this story. So recently, you guys may have heard that on October 12, 2024, you had an inmate found dead in a prison known as CSP, or California State Prison, Sacramento, more commonly known as New Folsom. Now, this individual who was unfortunately found dead in his cell, his name was Kyle Cooper. He was 50 years old, and on August the 11th, 2015 is when he was received into the California Department of Corrections, and he was sentenced to 37 years for second-degree robbery. He was 50 years old. He was sentenced to 37 years. I'm assuming that was either with 85 or 80%. So if you're thinking about it realistically, his life was pretty much, it was an ugly situation for him, man. It was looking bad. 50 years old, let's just say out of that 37 years, even if he had to do 33, it was going to put him out the gate around 83 years old if he could have survived that long. And as we see, unfortunately, he didn't. An alarm was called around 3:55. I'm assuming it was an officer doing their nightly checks or whatever, when they found him unresponsive in his cell. Upon entering his cell, he had head trauma. They sent him to the hospital to try to be to have life-saving techniques and things like that was performed on him, but he died. His cellie, who was known as Rashawn Mackey, 38 years old, he came to prison March 26, 2021, and he was doing 23 years for voluntary manslaughter. January of this year, 2024, he received 2 more years for an assault by a prisoner with a weapon. And so, of course, now for those of you guys not familiar with the makeup or the setting of prisons, more than likely, well, I'm not going to say more than likely. Let me say that this case isn't being investigated as a homicide, and more than likely, his cellie, Rashawn Mackey, is the one who done it. At 3:55 at night, these 2 individuals are locked in a cell, and so they are cellmates. So it's only those 2 dudes in the cell. The reports is that the 50-year-old gentleman, Kyle Cooper, suffered head trauma or severe head trauma. So of course we have to deduce that if no one's in the cell, it definitely had to be Rashawn Mackey. Kyle Cooper was 50 years old, like I said. Okay, let's go back to Rashawn Mackey. Rashawn Mackey was 38 years old. He had 23 years. Now, if that 23 years was with 80%, it would still put him out of the gate somewhere around 60, 61 years old, right? And now in prison, both of those dudes are relatively old by prison standards. 38 years old, even though it's still relatively young, but by prison standards, it's starting to get up there. Now 50 is definitely a little bit older by prison standards, but now at 38 years old, I still was exercising, playing basketball, was able to jump up and touch the rim and stuff like that. I was still athletic. So now I'm unable to touch the rim. So at 53. So what the point that I'm trying to make is there is a great difference between 38 and 50 years old, especially if the person who is 50 is no longer working out and just staying active, right? So it could be a great difference in strength, in wind, in cardio, all that type of stuff. So getting into a cell fight definitely would probably have not benefited the 50-year-old. And then also, I'm going to try to find a picture and put up a picture of what it's like in those cells in the California Department of Corrections. I've never been to New Folsom, but those cells are an extremely deadly place to get into a fight in, even if there is no weapons involved, because it's pretty much nothing in that cell except for concrete and metal. Those cells are so small, 9 times out of 10, any fight is going to eventually wind up a wrestling match, man. And you're in there wrestling, you're slamming people around. They said that he suffered severe head trauma. So let's just imagine him falling, him hitting his head on something, or once he failed, the dude was kicking his head up against the toilet, because once again, it is nothing in those cells except for concrete and steel. Everything is either made out of concrete and steel. When I was in prison, I was probably about 25, 26, 27, 8, still young. And then keep in mind, I came to prison relatively young, around the age of 22. So I'm still young. I'm still young-minded. Me and my homies, we would go up in the cell, we would wrestle around, we would slap box, all that type of stuff. Just doing what kids of that age or young dudes of that age would do, man. We'd go in the cell, and each time, man, I would come out the cell, I would hit something would be aching and hurting. And one time it got to the point where me and my homie, we went up in there and we wrestled around. I said, man, I'm through up in there. I'm through wrestling and playing, because it's no room up in there. And I was always hitting something, always, just getting hurt up in the cell, and that was just wrestling. So imagine a person up in there fighting for his life, going hard 100%. It was a deadly, deadly place to be fighting, right? Now we got to keep in mind too that these cells are extremely, extremely small. Where I'm staying at now, my house, man, my bathroom is bigger than any cell that I was ever in when I was in prison my whole entire 24 years. They pretty much have a person living basically in a gas station bathroom. These cells are extremely small. Some cells are smaller than others. Some cells are bigger than others. I believe I heard that New Folsom cells are a little bigger than average, but still, by any account, it's still a small place to live, especially with another man. Now, we got to keep in mind that, of course, nobody goes to prison for doing their best thinking. And I say that to say that a lot of times, us in prison as prisoners, we don't necessarily have the best communication skills. We don't necessarily have the best coexisting skills in a small place like that. Some people are selfish, some people are inconsiderate, and a lot of times it's gonna turn into a fight up in there, right? I had many cellies, right, who would just do things that was irritating. And I'm an extremely patient, laid-back dude, right? But I had one cellie in particular who he would play music on his headphones, but he would be rapping the words. And after a while, that gets irritating day in and day out when I'm down there, trying to either watch TV, trying to write a letter, maybe just relaxing in my thoughts or whatever. I had another cellie, the second this dude would come in the door, and he was a homie of mine, a dude who I grew up with, literally two doors away from each other. We grew up 2 doors away from each other. He would come in the cell, and soon as this dude wouldn't take 2 steps in the cell and just go to singing. Nobody wants to hear that stuff all day long. I had another cellie who he loved to play his music loud, even though we have radios in there with headphones and stuff like that. And I used to tell him, hey, homie, I'm not trying to, I'm trying to, man, pay attention to TV. I'm watching this documentary, or I'm trying to read. And, his reply was, oh, man, well, when I listen to my music, I like to listen loud, man. Come on, chill. And I knew me and this dude was in the county jail together. We was in Salinas Valley at this time. But come on, chill, man. Let's bump the music. And just that, people fail to realize that your program is your program. I didn't really care what my cellie did in the cell, as long as his program didn't affect my program. Once your program begins to affect my program, then that's where the problem lies, right? Now, also, like I said, you have a lot of dudes locked up in prison who do not know how to coexist. And many of us being gang members or dudes who was in the street, we don't even want somebody else saying something to us in the mildest of ways, because with our attitudes and our fear of looking weak, we feel that people are trying to check us. And that's where the problem, like I said, sometimes that's where the problem will arise, when an individual does not know how to communicate. And so it's extremely problematic living in those cells. And so my motto was, when I found a good cellie, I was going to try to stay with that dude. I don't care if my brother had to hit the yard, or my homie who I grew up with and been knowing him all my life. We'll kick it on the yard. But I got a good celly, man, a dude who, we coexist, we get along well together. And so this is where I'm going to stay, right? Like I said, man, in those cells was extremely, extremely tough. And sometimes you may see a dude on the yard, right? And this dude is jovial. He seems extremely cool. Somebody you can kick it with, laugh and talk, so on and so forth. So you say, hey, homie, your celly leaving next week, right? Let me move up in there. Oh yeah, I ain't tripping, homie. Come on up in here. Like I say, the dude is all cool on the yard and stuff. But then once you get up in the cell with this dude, you see that this dude is an entirely different person. And I had a celly or two like that, right? And sometimes who knows what is going on in the mind of this dude to suddenly make him, get a temperamental, become moody, so on and so forth. It may be something as simple as the mailman, the CO going past for the last 3-4 days, and he hasn't got any mail. Maybe he might be waiting on a letter. Maybe he'll have a phone call at 7:30. And now in prison, in the California Department of Corrections, depending on what prison you were at, you only get one phone call a day. If you happen to not have a job, you got one 15-minute phone call every 30 days. So imagine you waiting to call somebody, you maybe waiting to call your wife or your mother or your children or whatever, and you get one phone call every 30 days. Then you make the call and they're not home. You can't get through. Or imagine you just sitting back. I'm telling you, sitting up in that cell, with things on your mind, not being able to express yourself is something that is very hard to explain. And unless you have experienced that, it would even be hard for a person to understand, especially in this day and age where we all have cell phones, right? But you sitting up in there, maybe your last phone call didn't go too well. You got into an argument with your wife or your girlfriend or whoever, right? And so now how we get phone calls is we will have to sign up Wednesday for a phone call on Thursday, right? So now Wednesday, let's say 3:30, they come around with the phone sign up list. You look on there on the available slots and you sign up for a time that, that fits you, or you best think that you'll be able to contact your loved ones. So now let's say you sign up for a phone call, a prime time, and you sign up for the next day at 7:30 p.m. You know what I'm saying? So now you waiting all day long for this phone call. And like I say, man, being in prison when you're pretty much your entire movements are controlled by somebody else, the day is going by slow. You thinking about this phone call, so they pass out mail around 3:30. 3:30 goes by. You don't get no mail. You mad, you upset. You can't wait to get on the phone at 7:30. Somebody is signed up, of course, at 7:15. The phone slots go in 15-minute intervals, right? So 7:30 is your phone call. Here comes it 7:07, right? And all of a sudden a fight breaks out on the yard or in another building or whatever. They hit the alarm. Get down, get down, get down. So now everybody has to get down. So now you looking at the clock, time is ticking. You like, damn, man, I'm hoping they hurry up and resolve this situation, because they have to say resume normal program before everybody can stand up. So, the situation is going on and on. You don't know what's going on. It may be outside. It may be in another building, whatever. So the situation, they keeping everybody down. All of a sudden, they keeping everybody down. Once they finally say resume normal program, which means, go back, the problem has got cleared. It's 7:50. you don't get your phone call. You didn't miss your phone call. And everything like that, and those type of things can be extremely aggravating. So maybe when they come around for the phone sign-ups again, because each phone sign up, if I can remember, they would start, okay, so one day they may start at cell 2. Then the next day they would start 13 cells away at cell 15. Then the next day they would start another 13 cells away, right, at cell 28. So that way it affords everybody a equal opportunity to try to get prime slots, right? So let's say, when you had your phone call at 7:30, by the time, so that day when they did the phone sign up list at 3:30 and they came to your cell, only thing that was left was a phone call at 8:15 in the morning and maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. And maybe the people that you was trying to call was going to be at work at that time, so you didn't even sign up for a phone call for the next day. So now, like I said, once again, this incident has happened. They put the yard down, and when they let the yard up, it's 7:50. It's somebody else's phone time now. You can't go over there and say, "Hey, homie, I had a phone call at 7:30," because, like I said, the phone goes in 15-minute intervals. So it's 7:45. It's past you, way past your time. You have to wait. And some of these things are the things that, of course, can have a person irritable, have him upset, and then us being convicts, many of us being gang members, and us just being men in general. We are taught growing up that we cannot become emotional. We cannot show our emotions. And so you have a lot of convicts, man, who continue to stuff these angry feelings down. They get mad, they trying to cover their emotions. But regardless of how big a trash can is, you can only dump so much trash in that trash can. Eventually, that trash can has to be emptied. The same with an individual who is trying to stuff his emotions. At some point in time, you're going to explode. And it may be the smallest issue that makes you explode, man. Maybe your cellie might pass gas up in there. Maybe he might get down and use the bathroom, flush the toilet, wake you up. You just don't want to hear it. Any old type of thing, right? Maybe maybe whatever could set an individual off. If things was going smooth in his prison life, may not have even bothered him 2 weeks ago or a week ago or 2 days ago. But since he has a whole lot on his mind, now every little thing bothers him, right? So we really don't know what happened between these two individuals, but I'm just trying to paint a scenario to let you guys know that it's extremely, extremely dangerous when we living in these cells, right? And to be honest, it wasn't until, I want to say, maybe 2013, 2012, somewhere around there, right, when I realized how fortunate I had been doing all that time. Around that time, new things had came into play as far as lifers getting released, because initially when I first came to prison, if you had life with the possibility of parole, you pretty much still was sentenced to life without parole, because the parole board and the governor was systematically denying anybody who was in jail for murder and had a life sentence, right? I think they had, in the first 15, 20, maybe about the first 15 years I had been in prison, maybe 2% of people who went in front of the parole board got a date, right? And so those were horrific numbers if you were a person who had a life sentence, right? So later on, the board gets revamped. All these things started, happening that was helping lifers get parole. And one of the things that was instituted in the California Department of Corrections was they had these classes, self-help classes and stuff, right? Criminal thinking and anger management, victims awareness, and a bunch of different classes, right, that they wanted us to take and go to the board, and we would have to be able to discuss some of these classes and show that how we would apply the things that we learned in these classes into our daily lives in the event we was released, right, to help us be more productive, nonviolent, and not be part of the recidivism rate, which is people who have got out of prison and then came back, and so it was one particular class, and there was a lady. She would try just to get a lot, because she knew a lot of the convicts was either prisoners. Was it gang members and so on and so forth. And we had grew up in a time where many of us who were taught not to discuss or show or let out our emotions, right? And so you would have a lot of guys who would come in there and speak about things that kind of triggered them, or just certain inner demons that they carried in their lives, right? One particular dude, he spoke about being molested by a family member when he was around 9 or 10, somewhere around there, right? Maybe a little older. And when this family member would molest him, he would turn up the music real loud, right? And then so this was at an age, and this guy was born maybe in the mid 60s or whatever. So this was at an age when this was at a time when society frowned on same-sex relationships, right? So this what this guy said, that, being young, he would come outside, excuse me, just in the midst of being outside on the corner hanging with the fellas or whatever, the older dudes, he would often hear people make disparaging remarks about men who were in same-sex relationships, right? So it confused him knowing what was occurring in his life, right? Even though it was against his will, and he just felt, he felt out of place, he felt ashamed, and this is something that he held on to him for. He held on with inside of him for a long, long time, right? So now fast forward him being in prison, and his next door neighbor is playing the music loud, right? At this particular prison, the walls were extremely thin, right? And so he's asking his neighbor, "Hey man, can you please turn that down some, man? That loud music is irritating." But his neighbor, being inconsiderate, wouldn't turn the music down, right? But his neighbor is not understanding that what the music is really doing to this dude is it is triggering those memories when he was assaulted. And so he's getting angry, and he's getting mad, right? And he's ready to go next door and kill this dude, right? And so just upon hearing stories like that and several other stories, man, it made me realize, like, damn, man, I am extremely lucky, because you never know what inner demons a dude is holding, when you go in the cell with this dude, right? And at some point in time, you have to close your eyes and go to sleep, right? And it just made me, it really just made me just like say, damn, man, because when you're hearing these stories and you hear other dudes talk about how they got beat and abused by their father, and just a plethora of horrific tales, right, that would give a person insight into why sometimes dudes would explode. Because of course, being gang members, convicts, dudes in prison, and just being men who was born in a certain period of time, 60s, 70s, 80s, so on and so forth, where it was not a common thing, or a thing that was accepted by men to express their emotions. Of course, we held that stuff in, right? And so just like I said, once again, hearing these stories, man, it just made me just really think, like, dang, man, it's easy to get caught up in a situation. Real quick, I know I've been kind of long. That made me think back to, I'm pretty sure it was 9/11, when the towers was bombed. I was in Ironwood on A Yard, and if I'm not mistaken, that was the same day that a young black dude on B Yard had got into it with his cellie, and also lost his life. I don't know if his cellie had choked him out or whatever, right? If I'm not mistaken. And so with this incident here, who knows exactly what happened, right? It's being investigated as a homicide, and I'm willing to bet that's exactly what it was. Like I said, both these individuals were a little up in age as far as prison time goes, and they both had a substantial amount of time to do. I came to jail with a life sentence, but I was 23 years old, right? So in my mind, man, I could do maybe 25 years, somewhere around there. But when you come to jail at 38 years old and you got 23 years with 80%, and you figure, damn, man, I'm gonna be 50 something before I even get out. And of course, when you're in your 30s, when you're in your 20s or whatever, 50 seems extremely older than it actually is once you hit 50, right? So, I mean, and I say this often, it all depends on the mentality that a person who is doing time takes. If you feel like, man, my life is over, man, I'm gonna be such and such amount of years, but by the time I get out, man, I ain't going for nothing. I ain't, but it don't matter. And you mentally give up, sometimes that will show through your actions, right? And so it seems like that's probably what happened with at least Rashawn Mackey, the dude who was charged with this situation. Of course, after this, he was took to the segregated housing unit, also known as the SHU. And like I said, just in January 2024, he had been charged with an assault on a prisoner, or assault by a prisoner with a weapon, man. So unfortunately, it seems like it's a wrap for him. And these are just some of the things that people have to deal with being incarcerated. Like I said, man, they have two dudes basically living in a bathroom, man. You have to eat up in there. You have to sleep up in there. If they happen to go on lockdown, you're in that cell for extended periods of times, especially when I was doing time. I think now they have a certain amount of time that people can be on lockdown, but it's a whole lot, it's a whole lot to have to deal with. Then on top of that, you're stressing, you may not be getting mail, you may be married, you haven't heard from your wife, you got all this time, she's not coming to visit, she's out there messing around with somebody. It's just a lot of different things, man, a lot of different dynamics that can drive a dude over the edge. But anyway, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.